see your question, and we can start asking the presenters to give an answer. But as long as we don't have any questions so far, I would first with Lisette, with a question to you, Lisette. In the start of your presentation, you had the results from the Seneca study, and I was surprised to see when you put all the 4 lifestyle factors in account, and you put the high, the quality and low quality lifestyle. The difference in life expectancy is only 2 years. So is that a stimulation to have an excellent food habits, no smoking, all exercise the whole day, to put only 2 years extra?
Yeah, thank you for this question. And yeah, Seneca is like maybe getting older study wise, but at the time we started Seneca, there was still like the idea that diet doesn't matter at all later in life. That when you're old, it couldn't make a difference. And we managed to show that it did make a difference. And you say 2 years is maybe little, but it was the target of WHO at that time, to add another 2 years, healthful years, preferably to life. And we were really impressed by the number of 2 years, because all these people were over the age of 70. And then from that perspective, I think it's really worthwhile. And it's like exercise. It was not like the heavy exercise. So it was based on like the distributing the population according like their quartiles of activity. So it's more like the more active and the ones smoking less and drinking just in moderation and eating more according to a Mediterranean type of diet.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I see now in the question and answer section, I was in the chat session, that there are a number of questions now available. So maybe the next one for Oliver. Let's see. Where was this question? Like the Norton paper, branched chain amino would be an easy way to improve the muscle synthesis rate, in order that wouldn't be affect appetite too much, because leucine is of course not a very appetitable amino acid. So what do you think about that? So the supplementation with single amino acids, is that an...
Yeah, thanks, Vim, and thanks, Georgia, for that question. So yeah, I think you make a good point, and as Vim mentions, the taste of leucine alone is yeah, worth trying, but is not very nice at all. In terms of stimulation of protein synthesis, we did a study with branched chain amino acids alone, ingested after exercise, albeit in young adults. And we did show a stimulation of muscle protein synthesis when you ingested just the 3 branched chain amino acids, namely leucine, valine, and isoleucine. But the magnitude of this increase in protein synthesis was inferior to the magnitude of increase that you see with an intact protein source containing the same amount of branched chain amino acids. So what we deduced from this was that whilst you can stimulate protein synthesis with the ingestion of branched chain amino acids alone, to stimulate a marked increase in protein synthesis, you need a full profile of the essential amino acids. And it kind of comes back to that brick wall analogy, that having this full profile of amino acids is important if we want to maximally stimulate protein synthesis. Now, at the same time, I appreciate the question in terms of it's not all about protein synthesis. We need to look at this more holistically, and Lisette had a really nice slide at the end there with the puzzle that there's lots of different aspects of protein nutrition that we need to be considering. So, and appetite is certainly one of those. And of course, sustainability is another one. So I think that, we need to think about this in a broad sense that, there could be a role for branched chain amino acids alone, but if the goal is to maximize protein synthesis, then perhaps intact proteins or full amino acid profiles are superior.
Yeah, okay. In connection with this question is the one from George Verlaan, who is saying that blending different plant protein sources not lead to a kind of dilution of the essential amino acid profile, and therefore you need more protein in total. Is that not an issue?
Yes, so I think moving forwards, this blending of different protein sources is definitely an interesting area with a view to ensuring a complete profile of the essential amino acids. And whether that blending comes from the blending of different plant-based protein sources only, or whether that's a blending of animal proteins alongside plant-based proteins to try and at least reduce the intake of animal proteins, that's they're being looked at. And I know Luc van Loon in Maastricht University alongside Lisette are doing a great job of looking at those combinations. Of course, that does then lead to the question about the amount of protein that's needed to ensure that all of those amino acids are covered. And I think that comes down again to being smart about which combinations of different protein sources are being combined. Because if you are combining protein sources that are essentially complementary to one another, then you can try and minimize the dose. I don't know if Lisette wants to add anything there, because I know you're doing a lot of that work at the moment. So.
Yeah, but the studies are mostly done in younger populations, which, like I underlined in my presentation, we also have to study the consequences or the impact that this has on the muscle functioning of older people. And you also mentioned appetite, how we know that more plant is more volume and maybe more difficult to handle, especially when appetite in compromised situation is lowered.
Okay. I have a question for Professor De Groot. Here is from Tina van Doren, and she's asking, what do you think is the best method for protein intake to present to food in nursing homes?
Yeah.
In 6 times a day?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think there's many challenges in nursing homes, and what we are facing there is poor intakes. So I think maybe it's that's the starting point. How best to make people eat enough. And if then like distributing the meals over the day helps, then that might be a way to go. And I think there's at least a few studies supporting that. I know that in nursing homes in Australia, Sandra Juliano had a look at that. So that spread feeding, with spread feeding, it was easier to achieve required intakes. But it would be nice if in nursing homes there around like exercise, gym sessions, there could be some protein added, so that would also help the muscle then. So I would go that way.
And there was another question from Yi Soon. She's asking whether or not there is concern for adverse effects like falls at the level of intake from usual food, or is this relevant from supplement dose?
Yeah, I think it's for vitamin D, it's really there for the high doses, bolus dosages, which are much higher than the 20 microgram or the 800 international units a day. So if the intake or the dose is higher or given in like monthly or yearly, that's where the increased fall risk is observed. And for folic acid, it's there with the higher supplement doses.
in connection to that, the question from Hamid Jan B, he or she is saying, how could we prove that this is also that we can convince the policymakers to increase the levels of vitamin D supplementation, things like that?
I think in many countries there's also already the recommendation to use additional vitamin D. Like we have in the Netherlands the 20 micrograms per day, and I showed that you can't get that amount, or it's difficult to get that amount from foods. So additional fortified food or rich foods or supplements are recommended by our government. The problem is that that's people are not all that willing to use a supplement. So before Corona time, it was like about 1 in 4. I think like the past year, maybe this level might have increased, because there was really like a rush on all kinds of supplements, I understood. But there is already this, and I think it's been there for years, to use additional vitamin D.
Okay, good. Oliver, you said in your presentation that we only have data, no, not on, but nearly only have data on soy and wheat. So let's see what other plant proteins can offer us. Are you expecting a plant protein who can beat the animal protein level?
So good question, and I know there's a lot of work coming out of Maastricht at the moment, and also other universities, McMaster University as well. And I think those studies are set up in a way that aren't necessarily looking to see whether they beat an animal protein, whether that be milk protein or whey protein, but whether there's a similar response to the same dose of that of the animal protein, or whether the combination of different plant proteins can engender a similar response. So I'm not necessarily thinking that it's important to see whether there's a greater response, but if there's a similar response, then I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, but what is your own expectation?
My own expectation is that it won't beat the animal response. That would be my expectation.
By the way, one of the questions is also, how is an increase in fish intake of importance, and is it sustainable?
Yeah, that was a good question. And I appreciate that probably wasn't completely clear in my presentation. And I think the answer to that is it depends. It depends on so many factors related to the fish type, the fishing practice, the global differences in that response. And I think when it comes to sustainability, it's so complex. There are so many different factors that can be used to define sustainability, and those different factors are different for different parts of the world. When we think about shipping or the different processes involved in going from farm to fork, etc. So I think that's a really difficult question to answer, and it's the dreaded "it depends" kind of answer, I suppose.
Yeah, and there was a question from somebody with a very difficult name, but nevertheless, her or his question is related to vegan elderly people. Can they ever met an muscle protein synthesis rate which is enough?
There have been studies that have compared vegetarian individuals with omnivorous diets, and they've been quite mixed in terms of the findings. Some studies have shown that meat eaters are able to maintain muscle to a greater extent, whereas others have shown no differences between the two groups. And I think that comes down to the education that is required with these vegan diets. I think it's quite clear that a vegan diet would require much more education to ensure that the full essential amino acid profile is being met within that dietary intake. So I think it is possible. It's just, but it does require a lot more knowledge around the amino acid profile of different plant-based protein foods compared to, say, animal proteins that essentially are typically have a full essential amino acid profile.
Yeah. In relation to that, and that is a more personal question, since I had a back operation last year with also loss of muscle in my legs completely, and restoring them, that was quite difficult being an old man now. And exercise is of course hard, and it costs a lot of effort. Are there other possibilities nowadays to increase your muscle again? Because the food intake is of course of importance, and protein intake, but it is only limited, to my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I can start with that one in terms of a couple of studies that spring to mind. Again, were out of Luc van Loon's lab that looked at neuromuscular electrical stimulation in terms of the impact of stimulating the muscle electrically, and they were quite. Those studies were actually really quite promising in terms of they saw a stimulation of muscle protein synthesis. So I think there is some, and I don't know if you were on those studies, Wim and Lisette, but some quite promising findings in that sense. I don't know if you've got anything to add there, Lisette.
No, I was also thinking about those studies, and indeed, they might be an alternative. There's some evidence there. Yeah.
Okay. Good. I see it is 10 o'clock and we have to stop now. I would like to thank you both, Lisette and Oliver, for your excellent presentation and also for the discussion we had so far. I would like to stimulate the participants to come back in 20 minutes. I think it is 20 minutes, yeah, after the break. And during the break, you can also visit the FrieslandCampina Institute. Quite interesting to see what you can see over there, with also some information about the presentations we had this morning and will come up in the next session. So thank you both, and thank you all the participants for this stimulating discussion we had at the end of this session. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.